person sitting right there. Okay, folks? You know, I'm just saying to myself, and I'm getting messages, the same thing. People on my Facebook, Twitter, they're saying the same thing, Vinny. We hope this jury gets it. But then again, it could just be that one juror who just doesn't get it yet.
Well, Dwane Cates, D.C., he gets it. Great criminal defense attorney out there in Arizona. D.C., thanks so much for being here. Let me ask you about this issue. Does this mean that maybe the defense took the wrong approach to this trial, that they shouldn't go with self-defense, that they should turn this back into a whodunit and go back to Jodi Arias' first story or maybe her second story rather than coming up with a third story?
Vinny, I hate to second guess the defense and what they're doing because they haven't put their case on yet, so we don't know really what they have to put forward. But juries are strange things. Out of 10 jury trials, you're going to lose one you're supposed to win, you're going to win one you're supposed to lose, and the other 8 turn out kind of like you figure. So you never know which one of those cases is going to be the outlier. Now, the great thing about jury questions is that they give you some insight about what people are thinking, and I think it's very interesting. I argued on this show before that it just doesn't seem likely that Jodi Arias could drag that body down the hall with a camera in her hand by herself. The juror may be thinking the same thing. There had to have been somebody else there to help. I don't know. It's hard to tell what they're thinking.
All I can think about is your haircut. DC, looks good. I mean, you went real short. It makes you look even smarter. How about that?
Well, I need all the help I can get, Vinny.
Looking good, DC. Joey Jackson, should the prosecutor be worried by this question? Because this is like, you talk about out of left field. This is like way out of left field because this is like we're talking about alibis of other people. We're trying to figure out who did this at this point.
No worries at all if you're the prosecutor. They put together a case. The case was compelling. I think they logically and rationally stated the evidence. It points to her stalking and everything else, which culminated in her premeditation of his murder. However, as to the question, though, Vinny, it could be that the jury just wants to know if there are other people around who might have seen something, may have heard something, and might have something to add as to whether or not the self-defense claim is credible. So perhaps it's not that they're looking for someone else being responsible, but just looking for someone else who might know something.
I might agree with you, Joey, if they didn't use that word alibi. To me, that's a loaded word.
It is.
Alibi. Do you have an alibi?
But
if you don't have an alibi,
lawyers.
You could have done it. You know what I mean? It's just that choice of word. I would agree with you if it was just this question, which is another question that the jury had, which is, did Mr. Alexander have a boarder or another person living in the house? Like if it was just that question, Gene Casares, alone, without that word alibi, I would be, okay, that might actually be a very smart question, a very important question about who else could have been there and seen something, because it doesn't have that loaded word alibi there.
But you know what, Vinny? Those are two separate juror questions right there, because a roommate and a boarder is the same thing. So those two questions come from two jurors. It's not the same juror that's asking that question. And we know from Marie Hall, who recanted the entire story in her testimony, the roommates were at home. So the question about an alibi for the roommates, and I think Dwane Cates has hit it head on. We heard through the medical examiner he weighed 189 pounds during the autopsy and would have weighed more in his life. So you've got almost a 200-pound man, and you see Jodi Arias. How did she do it all? I mean, how did she successfully do it all, more or less drag him? I think that's a tough question.
It is, and it's a fair question.
Her guilt.
And it's a very fair question because really, Mike Brooks, the only evidence this prosecution team has about the strength of Jodi Arias and how she could have done it is from Ryan Burns, the man she had the makeout session with after killing Travis Alexander, who called her feisty.
Yeah, because she was moving him around.
Yeah.
You know,
she's a feisty one.
Strategically, if you will. Yeah, she is. And think about it, too. All that blood, and that makes someone very slippery, if you will, wet. And it's tough. But I've seen women drag a 185-pound dummy a long distance when you're trying out for the fire department or you're trying out for the police department. So a woman can do it.
D.C., I think prosecutors will argue adrenaline of the moment. You know, I think common sense tells you 189 pounds is a lot. I mean, that's heavy, and I understand that. If I'm a prosecutor, I got to go with adrenaline of the moment. You've just stabbed someone. You've just killed another human being. You've slit their throat. You stabbed them 29 times. You shot them in the head. You are, you know, have the adrenaline pumping like no other time in your life. So what is the defense going to say? Do you think they actually say she didn't drag his body?
Well, I don't know if they can with the self-defense theory. I mean, you know, the thing is the state's case has to look good right now because it's been all the state putting on their case to this point. So the case should look really good for the state. But, you know, I tell you what, the defense has got to have a plan, and they've got to have something going on. Now, there was a weird interview over the weekend with one of the reporters from the local TV stations went down to the jail and just walked in and asked to talk to Jodi. And he went in and talked to her for 45 minutes off the record. None of that was, nothing that she said was published. But the reporter came out and said that she basically had charmed him and had him believing that she had a chance to win this case. So, I mean, if she gets on the stand and is that charming, you never know what's going to happen.
Vinny, you know, I want to go back to the moving of the body, you know, the dragging. Look at that hallway. One of the things I was thinking about, look at that hallway, and we talked about maybe she tried to clean that hallway. Well, what if she had taken him and rolled his body onto a towel and dragged that towel down the hallway? That would look like it was cleaned up, and it's a lot easier to slide someone on a towel or on a rug than it is.
It's like moving a big piece of furniture.
Exactly.
Joey Jackson, let's talk about what D.C. just mentioned. There was this local reporter just walked into the jail and came out, and I watched his report on I think it was on local Fox out there in Phoenix, and he seemed like he was convinced that she was very, very convincing. You know, from the beginning of this case, we always thought she had to testify and could testify and believed in herself and was confident that no jury would ever convict her. I think she is going to demand that she testify in this case.
You know what? That could potentially be true, Vinny, but think about this, right? Even if she's very convincing and she could give an Academy Award performance, at some point you have to match what she says with regard to her sincerity versus all of the inconsistencies and the other evidence in the case. And so she has a lot of explaining to do, no matter how soft-spoken she might be, no matter how believable, no matter how convincing. Someone's dead in horrific fashion, and there are multiple stories she gave to explain that, in addition to a lot of other evidence which points to her and not to self-defense. And so, therefore, it will be interesting if she does testify. She may not, though, because psychiatrists might testify on her behalf. You know how that works. But ultimately, if she does, she's going to have a lot to account when the prosecutor starts his cross-examination, Vinny.
You know, Gene Cassar says, I think about Jodi Arias on the witness stand and testifying on direct. I think it's going to be all about Travis Alexander.